All signs point to this, as multiple new reports have dropped revealing some very interesting and huge details surrounding Steven Lorentz and his future in Toronto. We're going to break down those reports and discuss what it means going forward, as Elliot Friedman had some interesting things to say about the forwards. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, but before we get into it, if you're part of the 70% or so that aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. And if you're enjoying the daily content, the double uploads, all that, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 15,000 subscribers. But Darius, today is an off day. The Leafs play tomorrow, a huge game against the Carolina Hurricanes. But we had a video earlier today surrounding some trade rumors. There's going to be a lot more of those, but we also got some new reports surrounding a familiar face with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it's actually pretty big and could pay big dividends going forward because he's kind of been one of the hidden gems of the offseason for Brad Treliving, and we are talking about Steven Lorentz. Now, we're going to start with this. This dropped on New Year's Eve, so about a week ago, but we do have another report from Elliot Friedman that came out just yesterday, so stay tuned for that. Kyprios mentioned a Steven Lorentz extension could come soon. He could sign as early as January 1st. Would make a lot of sense. He's been a great player on the fourth line, defensively responsible, and always brings physicality from Kitchener, Ontario, and will be cheap. Get it done, Brad. Now, we'll dive into a bunch of the other things, but Darius, usually when we hear things like this from Kyprios, from Frank Saravalli, it means, and most of the time, a deal gets done pretty soon after that. Now, that didn't happen quite yet with Steven Lorentz here, but I would not be surprised if this deal gets done before the end of the season because he has fit in perfectly with the Leafs. And obviously, if he continues to play like this, I don't think the Leafs will have any problem paying him as a very serviceable and well-paid fourth liner.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have any problem giving this guy a bit of a raise. He's come in, obviously on a PTO, and he signed a league minimum deal. And I think that if he got a bit of a raise, I would have no problem with this because this is a guy who can play on your fourth line. We've seen so far this season when asked upon, he can play on the third line as well. I think ideally he's on your fourth line, but he adds so much to this lineup that we saw in the preseason that he was pretty much undeniable. We knew through one game in the preseason that they were going to sign him to a standard contract. So he's been great since he got here. He adds so much physicality. He adds, the fact that he's won a Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers last year, and they need more guys to play like him, or they need, some of the top guys to continue to play that style. And they have been so far this season. So I think he's a great complement piece. He's exactly the type of guy that you can win with. And I think, obviously he was eligible for a contract extension starting January 1st. And usually, like you said, when Kyprios and all these guys, and especially Friedman, start to mention things like this, it's probably going to come very, very soon. I think for the Leafs, why not get it done soon? Like, there's no reason not to re-sign this guy. You absolutely should keep him into the future. And why not get it done in season? So at least you know what your salary cap structure looks like heading into next year.
Yeah, we know the two biggest moves that they've done, or one of the two biggest paying moves regarding value, have been Max Pacioretty and Steven Lorentz. Specifically, Steven Lorentz, who has played almost every game, if not almost every game this season, maybe even every game. I'll fact check that, but he's played a ton of games. He has been kind of the anchor on that fourth line. We saw him a few games ago go back up to the third line, depending on injuries. But throughout all this, he has sustained a very strong run with this team, and he's played 42 games this season, 8 points in 42 games. And Darius, he's only 28 years old, so it's not like this is a guy who was a 34-year-old, a mid-30s-year-old coming off of course, a season with the Florida Panthers in which, let's not forget, he won the Stanley Cup. So, and even this, like the points, most of the times with players like this, you'd say, hey, the points don't really match up. Also, fact check, he has played every single game this season. So I just did a quick fact check on the fly. For players like this, you'd think, hey, the points don't fully match up. 8 points in 42 games for what he brings is actually pretty solid as well. And he's having a great, I'm not going to say breakout year necessarily, but given what the Leafs expected and their role, it is absolutely a breakout season, at least from Leafs fans, at least from my perspective as a Leafs fan and what I expected coming in. And he said he's playing for his hometown team. When you have a group of guys like we do, I know every team says that, but everyone gets along and guys gel well off the ice. That's how we perform on the ice as well. So the guys have each other's backs, and it's a lot of fun. And we'll get into the mentors thing here in a minute. But Darius, a guy who's played every single game for the Toronto Maple Leafs, he's been an anchor.
Yeah, he's been the Iron Man this season as well. He's played in every single game. And the style of game that he plays, sometimes we'll see guys get injured, right? But he doesn't. He's in every game. He's battling. And he tries really hard with the minutes that he's given. He's only averaging about 10 minutes on ice so far this season, but every time he's out there, he's giving it 100%, and he's really getting after it. So I really love that from him. There's a stat here, which we'll get into, that isn't on this graphic that I think is actually one of the more important stats that he brings to the team. So we'll get to that in a second. But like you mentioned, right, big body, still very young. He's 28 years old. There's no reason not to sign this guy at this point. I mean, he adds something to your lineup that you desperately needed. You're seeing this season that, he's the type of guy to me, maybe not David Camp, maybe not Connor Dewar, scorer, but Steven Lorentz to me could score a big playoff goal for the Leafs. He just, is the type of guy that's going to be able to get it done in those moments that when you really need a goal and the top guys are tied up with matchups, I feel like he could squeeze one out. That's not, the nicest goal. It's going to be an ugly goal, right? I can see that from him. And he's done it time and time again this season. And like you mentioned, not a breakout season, but he is looking at some career highs, so I think it's been a really good season for him. He loves playing here, right? He's from here. He's from Kitchener, of course, and he played in the OHL. So I think this is it's a great match. Honestly, just get the contract done.
Yeah, you can see from Elliot Freeman right here. Can't imagine too much trouble for Toronto and Lorentz on a contract extension. So all signs point to him getting that done, and he's already surpassed his point total heftily. He had 3 points in 38 games, I believe it was last year. And this season, he's already at 42 games, so 8 points. And he has been a solid fourth liner for a while. You think back to his time with the Sharks, where he put up over 15 points, somewhere near 20 points, if I recall. So he's a very solid player. And he also talked about choosing his dad on the mentors trip, and obviously just goes on to praise everything that he did for him, which is obviously a great sign. He's just a class guy, a very good guy, at least from what we can tell. Of course, not in there every day. A great player. And I don't know if it could have, if out of all the players that Brad's looking, like we were talking about a lot of PTOs, a lot of guys they could have gotten. They clearly picked 100% the right guy here. And you look at the lineup that's continued to play, and Steven Lorentz was elevated last game to the third line because, of course, Nick Robertson was out. They wanted Ryan Reeves in. You have Connor Dewar and David Kemp playing well now. It's all great for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And one thing that he brings to the team, Darius, that is not even an intangible. It's literally tangible. It's right here, is the hits. And you see him every night, and you would not expect that Steven Lorentz would be leading the Maple Leafs in hits. And again, I mean, shout out to Ryan Reeves. He obviously has a ton of hits in a little amount of games, but he leads the team in hits. He's a +2, which is actually pretty important considering he plays the fourth line. Usually it doesn't matter too much. 8 points. And ultimately, him and Max Pacioretty have been throwing their bodies around. Both PTOs as well. And Pacioretty's done it in a lot less games.
And I think that's an important stat there. I don't like to look at plus minus too much, especially with top guys, because there's a lot of special teams in there. But when you look at Steven Lorentz playing on the PK, playing a lot 5-on-5 on the fourth line, the fact that he's a +2, I think, is a real plus for this season. And this list, I mean, in terms of hits, is like everyone you expect it to be on this list in the top 5, I guess. But Steven Lorentz leading it just shows you, like, with minimal ice time. Like, Benoit plays quite a bit because obviously he's a defense. You got Matthew Nyes out there, Max Pacioretty. These guys have more ice time, but Lorentz is throwing the body around more in less ice time. I think that just goes to show his type of game and exactly what he's bringing to the lineup. So I love to see it. It makes perfect sense. I want to see him continue to be a Maple Leaf. It just made so much sense when they brought him in on a PTO, as you can see here. I mean, last year compared to this year, he didn't play as many games last year, but I think that just goes to show what he means to this team and what he's bringing to the table. And the fact that, there's certain guys coming out of the lineup and it's not him all the time tells you that he's adding something that they desperately need. And again, I think he's going to be a big factor come playoff time. I love this guy's game. I love the fact he just oozes passion ever since he got here, and I love that. And I think they need more guys like that. So love this, and I hope that they re-sign him. I think it's going to be a reasonable contract, and even if it is a bit of a raise, I have no problem with it. I'd rather give him a raise than some other guys who have gotten raises in the past. So I think that obviously it's not going to be anything too significant, but shouldn't be too much trouble.
Yeah, it's also wild that he played 38 games last year, and so far he's played every single game for the Leafs through 42 games. Now, again, Panthers are a very good team. He's used to playing, and you don't have to worry about his durability because he's used to playing. Maybe just a couple seasons ago, he played 80 games with the San Jose Sharks and put up 19 points. So let us know down below what your thoughts are on the report from Kyprios and the brand new report from Elliot Freeman. Seems like a deal is nearing. All signs point to him being a Leaf for at least a couple more years, maybe a contract similar to what Benoit got. And a lot of these guys, Philip Myers, all these different players that the Leafs bring in, don't expect too much from, and end up playing really well and shining in the system. But thank you guys for watching. See you in the stream tomorrow and the video as well.